Now, little update here, Gons. Along with, as we monitor the shifts in the Great Reset, the global theologies of economies, all the things. Over here at Newsweek, mirrored by MSN, the headline, Georgia Guidestones explosion videos reveal how monument was destroyed. And a lot of people were talking about this, sending this, lots of breakdown videos claiming that it was a lightning bolt that actually struck the Georgia Guidestones. Certainly a lot of theologically rich reasons to think that's the case. Not quite on board with the lightning bolt theory based on the videos available. However, there is a strange secondary explosion that is a bit unexplainable. And there's a lot of versions of this clip going around. I will say one of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation clips here shows that at 4:03 in the morning,
it's 4:03:33.
I know, hold on. 4:03 in the morning and 32 seconds. And you play the clip, and exactly 4 o'clock, 3 minutes and 33 seconds is when the explosion goes off. You do see the explosion of the Georgia Guidestone there, and you see an extra little explosion in the background, which is a bit unexplained. Some people think that it's a lightning bolt. Some people think that it's was kind of a bazooka situation where it was a projectile launched at the Georgia Guidestones. Because there is video footage of a car pulling up and then the explosion happening and then the car driving away. And there's no footage of people running to go set a bomb or something. So it kind of looks like some sort of cannon. Like I said, leftover fireworks. This is a big potato shooter, basically. It's my theory. But one thing I thought was really fascinating is this part right here. The videos show the explosion and a car leaving the scene shortly after the explosion. No one was injured. For safety reasons, the structure has been completely demolished, the GBI added in a follow-up tweet. They just took the whole thing down. The monument was made up of several rock slabs, etc., etc. They demolished the rest of the Georgia Guidestones, which I think is weird considering that there's an ongoing investigation. And, I guess maybe they're just done. It took them one day to be like, yeah, okay, we kind of get the point. It was a big rock and now it's a bunch of little rocks. Yeah, that's fine. Make the rest of them little. Because I don't know who's in danger. And it's not like the tourism is open and you got people walking around it. But, it did sort of harken back to how quickly they were demolishing the Uvalde school, how quickly, demolishing things after an incident like this so soon, even during investigations. It's just very strange.
Yeah.
And I think on one hand, I don't know if it's an evidence type of thing or a cover-up type of thing. Who knows? But what I'm very curious about is what will be built in its place.
Yep. Like a phoenix rising from its ashes.
Yeah, maybe, we've been talking about the New World Order as far as the Great Reset, but the New World Order really, starting its construction after World War II. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing now with the Great Reset is New World Order 2.0, basically.
Yeah.
I wonder if they need to take down this New World Order monument so they could put up the new one.
It's possible. And it's also, if you think about the post-World War II American New World Order that was built, it was built on conservatism. It was not built on liberalism. I mean, there's some libertarianism in there, but it was mostly conservative values and
even though they
policy.
Call it the liberal world order.
They call it the liberal world order, at the top or whatever. And and certainly it is an ebb and flow, like we've always talked about. Yeah. But there's a paragraph in this MSN article. This is not the first incident in which the monument has been attacked. in quotes, attacked. It was vandalized in 2019 when a man carved WWG1WGA, where we go one, where we go all. An acronym
I didn't hear
used,
about that one.
Yeah, an acronym used to identify QAnon supporters into the rock.
Yeah.
The rock has also been vandalized with paint over the years, and several tweets show pictures of the monument with messages written in red paint across it.
Yeah.
So, part of what we did here, and I tried to get this in on the last episode because of the situation here, and we covered it a little bit more extensively there. But I did inquire our friend and colleague, Dr. Future, to share some thoughts about this because, of course, he did the research. He's been there, and he did a whole documentary about R.C. Christian and the Guidestones. Dark Clouds Over Elberton is the name of the film. But I want to read this. It's a little bit long, but there's some good parts. So we're just going to dive in. This is the note from Dr. Future regarding the Georgia Guidestones explosion.
Yeah, one of the creators of the sort of premier Georgia Guidestones documentaries that revealed a lot of the mysteries that people sort of ignore still.
Yeah. He says, at the time that I write this, mere hours after the explosive and violent vandalism of the Guidestones, it is not known who conducted the property damage. It might be known shortly or possibly never, but as when I was there in 2010, there was a surveillance camera on a pole there, but it appeared to be unplugged. So clearly it was not unplugged. It was plugged in because we have all this footage here from, on the MSN article here, or not MSN. What is this?
It's Newsweek.
Newsweek, yeah. However, the timing of this event, which has gotten the attention of the global press, would be most coincidental if it did not reflect the Georgia governor campaign of Candace Taylor just a few weeks ago, which we mentioned in the last episode. Her campaign slogan on her bus was God, Guns, and Babies. She recently lost a Republican primary in her Republican rivals with only 3% of the vote, but has claimed election fraud and refuses to concede, as is having her voters sign affidavits now on her website so as to overturn it. The centerpiece of her platform were 10 executive orders she would invoke immediately as the new governor. They involved forming, and he lists all of them here. Let me get them real quick. Forming a Georgia State Guard to assist with election fraud and illegal immigration, 2020 Election Investigation Commission, no mandate for masks or vaccines, eliminate comprehensive sex education, dress code for public schools, educator attire will reflect biological gender for all state school employees, no flurry-related items will be worn. I guess it's part of it. Yeah, that's what it says.
What's flurry?
Furry. Sorry, furry.
Furry. Yeah, okay. Is they having a problem with that in Georgia, huh? Too many teachers showing up with furry tails?
Yeah, yep. More on the list here. Public school classrooms will be taught the historical basis of the Bible, Christian religion being involved with the common law while prohibiting anti-white racism, communism, and sexual perversion, funds for Christian programs from a budget surplus, etc. However, she withheld what she considered the 10th and final and most important executive order and delayed it to announce to great fanfare and promotion until just before the election, that being her plans to immediately destroy the Georgia Guidestones. This was pointed out by John Oliver on HBO's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, who also reviewed and mentioned Dark Clouds Over Elberton. Hey, John Oliver, give him some cred.
That's fun. I had not watched that show in a long time. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know either. Let's see. Where was I? Okay. For which I did the research. This is continuing on here. Dark Clouds Over Elberton, mentioned by John Oliver, for which I did the research, and its identity of the mysterious builder of the Guidestones and his motivations. One of the few things Mr. Oliver took very seriously. When the blasting destruction of one pillar of the Guidestones occurred early this morning, the media immediately went to her for comment, and online she attributed it to being an act of God. On her website today, under Executive Order 10, which she says will be to demolish the Georgia Guidestones and turn them into dust, she notes that the global Luciferian regime tore down our historical monuments, Confederate heroes, etc., persecuted our children, locked us down in our homes, and forced us into becoming walking science experiments through a global vaccination program. They erected statues spelling out the exact plans they had for us. That's part of the quote. She also recently stated publicly that under her leadership, sheriffs she deems treasonous will be shot by firing squad.
Whoa.
Yeah, I would like to see that, by the way. I wonder if she was being tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
She was being serious about that. It seems awfully serendipitous that the Guidestones will be destroyed mere days after she popularized these notions in the press. Recent polls by the major polling agencies have shown that 45% of Republicans say that resorting to violence is acceptable to invoke political change. The January 6th insurrection with patriots, in quotes, impaling policemen with American flags, evangelicals with Jesus Saves flags, shoulder to shoulder with Odin worshippers, and neo-Nazis chanting to hang Mike Pence with gallows, and now have confirmed police radio transmissions of people armed with AR-15s walking all over the ellipse and surrounding area at the time, shows that the last 5 years of public political discourse has normalized violence even amongst the Jesus followers, as their political messiah reflected the dark ID or id of the religious right, which now has become the normative cultural superego, as Freud might express it. I see it in my own upscale neighborhood of all Baptist regular church attenders. They tipped me off to their friends' involvement in Washington days before the January 6th insurrection. They played dark musical religious dirges of defending their race loudly, assure me that new neighbors moving in are, quote, okay, they're white Europeans like us, and threaten new outsider neighbors on Facebook of collective violent actions, quote, coming over to see them after batting practice. This coming from someone I worshipped next to for years as a Christian leader. Wow. So he's telling us about some personal, anecdotes here about, just having that sort of white nationalist sentiment being displayed amongst his community, which I don't think is uncommon. I think there's enough of that sort of propaganda type of thing that's been out there to cause, oh, that's super cute. Daughter drawing again. What was I saying? Something about this thing here. I'm just going to keep reading. Another bright-faced, sweet teacher and discipler of young women in our Baptist church down the street volunteered to tell me during the George Floyd demonstrations, the assurance telling me as I walked my dog past her manicured lawn that, quote, they won't come up here in our neighborhoods because they know we have guns up here and know how to handle it, end quote. The violent attack on this controversial monument is going to become more of the norm rather than the traditional Christian outreach manner of merely exposing the dark nature of its message and warning others of a more positive Christian alternative. I must acknowledge that this change goes back to the anti-Sharia mania of a decade or more, turning Christians into violent, overt monsters and barbarians, even destroying the shops of new peaceful Muslim neighbors in, quote, Christian neighborhoods, like in my original hometown of Louisville. So all kind of good points, but also, I just want to say that, again, a lot of this is part of the propaganda of radicalizing the conservative right. And I know Dr. Future knows that, but I think, some people might mistake when he talks about this as like, oh, he's just peddling the liberal narrative. And it's like, no, that's not exactly what he's doing. Although I know it kind of sounds like that, especially if you're in that sort of real far right thinking. That it can come off that way. So he continues here. The biggest irony is, while I'm almost certain that the Guidestones destroyers are likely of a more conservative, libertarian, and likely Christian bent, although not certain yet, we reveal the true originators of the Guidestone in our documentary and acknowledged by John Oliver that they were hard right, conservative libertarian practitioners by their own admission. The man we identified as R.C. Christian wrote to the Tampa Bay Tribune that he took a very hard line against immigrants, believed in sending drug users to concentration camps, and was enthusiastic endorsers of David Duke, a top public Klansman and Nazi who was elected, or former, supposedly, elected to the Louisiana legislature as having the, quote, right ideas. As he revealed on the Guidestones in his public letters, private court, then back to R.C. Christian, as he revealed on the Guidestones in his public letters, private correspondence, and book with his henchmen, quote, Common Sense Renewed, which fully fleshed out his ideology, in which it was clearly a Darwinistic view of survival of the fittest, with no pity allowed. It took a hard line against immigrants of those of non-European heritage and looked at what was, quote, best for the most. Victims be darned. In fact, as I lay out in my last book, Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1, as a lifelong conservative and libertarian for some time, a concentrated study of the Bible for myself has led me to believe that the conservative libertarian worldview and ideology and subsequent basic values are built on the foundation of social Darwinism, with every man for himself, survival of the fittest, economic and social policies, gunboat diplomacy, and the like. This value system focuses on the 90 and 9 sheep and sacrifices the one lost, whereas Jesus leaves the 99 and 9 to find the one lost sheep, one that each of us has been at some time. He and his father focused on the Anawim, the lost and forgotten ones, who were the stranger in the camp without strength of numbers or political or economic power, and even those held institutionally by various means and not even able to vote. Alternatively, we see these people on the margins now are met with contempt and distrust and now open hostility here in quote-unquote Christian America. It should be no surprise that the religious right today looks like their Pharisee forebearers who picked the violent revolutionary killer Jesus Barabbas over humble Jesus Christ, who said, "If my kingdom were of this world, then my disciples would fight." Any thoughts so far? I got a couple more paragraphs and it's the end of the note here.
No, I mean, this is all very much in line with what I would expect Dr. Future to say.
Sure. A little bit more. The rise of violence is nowhere near peaking. Wait until candidates try to outdo each other with braggadocio during the 2023 Republican debates up through the election in 2024 and inauguration. Threats and intimidation have become quote unquote cool, even amongst the Christian set. I will even be directed towards things that seem bad, like the Georgia Guidestones, not recognizing that they already espouse many of the values they are fighting in heaven's eyes, as they are confused and don't really know who they are fighting against, or if they only, if they're, I think there's a little typo here, or if the ones they follow are really the enemy. I, for one, renounce this non-Christ-like value system, and I encourage other Christ followers in your audience to reject ungodly violence and intimidation and join me as we seek together the to sort out how to follow Christ in these confusing days and to trust your conscience and still small voice and not the hirelings who are celebrity public leaders or religious teachers or even our local pastors, and join the narrow way. It is not about following any political party or ideology as citizens of another kingdom, but rather realizing our public interactions and civic responsibilities to our neighbors revolve around the golden rule, the weightier matters of the law and kingdom of heaven agendas, and an intervention and advocacy for the maimed, halt, and blind who are real invitees, to the marriage feast of the Master. I'm sorry, I have a daughter here bumping into the microphone. There you go. That's the note from Dr. Future. And as you said, not unexpected from Dr. Future. Good points there, but also,
and I mean, as always, as we've had a few times in speaking with him about this subject that he is so eloquent and passionate about, it really is a good reminder to everyone that we must be careful about who we are letting to pull our strings, because I recommend everybody, if you can find it, is the Georgia Guidestones documentary available still?
Yeah, I got to find an official link to it.
We need to find an official link for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting because we consider, Georgia Guidestones was kind of dreamt up 50 years ago and put up a little bit after that. It's sort of the assumption that the Georgia Guides, whoever put up the Georgia Guidestones when they were put up, would basically hold all the same beliefs and plans that, say, like Klaus Schwab would hold.
Right.
You know what I mean? You kind of think that it's like Klaus Schwab himself would have put up the Georgia Guidestones. And the fact is that it wasn't. It was a totally different group of, it was a different, it was different people with entirely different public ideologies than like a Klaus Schwab. However, still in the same milieu, it seems, as the end goal, rather, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Future's passion, it seems now, is reminding Christians especially to not let politicians or online personalities or the news media or even perhaps even their pastor, who might have motivations beyond simply preaching the word of God or whatever, pull their strings and guide them into sort of, you could even say sort of allegorically, guide them into a herd that they shouldn't be in. Like, make sure you're in the right kind of flock that isn't necessarily just weaponizing you as a voter or as a, as some sort of soldier in a war that we were never called to fight. And it's an easy trap to fall in.
Right. And that's why I said Ephesians 6 as the theme here. Because with all of this, with all the Abe thing we went through and CERN and everything points to this idea that we're not supposed to be fighting each other. The war is spiritual. We're fighting against principalities, powers,
right?
Spiritual wickedness.
And remember, we identified the other day that the left in this country, who has been screaming about how the right is disassembling democracy and ruining democracy, and nobody was really kind of buying it, just because there wasn't more to it. There wasn't more explanation. There wasn't more breakdown. There wasn't more anything. The threat wasn't quite clear until they could adequately describe that the threat is democracy is being dismantled and theocracy is being created in its place. And it helped them more than anything, the Roe v. Wade thing, because they could finally say, this is democracy dismantled. Instead, the right is trying to create theocracy. And what you see from this Georgia, what is this woman? Candace something or other? The Georgia gubernatorial candidate. Yep. Her entire platform is basically theocracy. Mm-hmm. And I've said it again, there's certainly lots of ways that I wish that I could see my country, being legislated. But you cannot legislate people into the kingdom of God. Right. It just doesn't work that way. The problem is so many believers nowadays have their strings held so tightly by political forces that somehow we get convinced that we can legislate this country into the kingdom of heaven.
Candace Taylor, that's her name.
What's that? Candace Taylor,
yeah.
Right. And her
Dr. Candace Taylor.
Her candidacy is a great example of that. Her campaign is basically 100% across the board a sort of example of a theocratic governing of the state. Now, if that's what the people of the state want, then that's totally fine. That's how democracy works. But it's obviously not what they wanted, as she didn't even win the primary. And so that's what I think is so valuable about when Dr. Future reminds us of these things. He certainly holds, he doesn't even talk so much about his own political beliefs, but it does trigger people. And if that's triggering you, as it can trigger me as well, but it's an invitation to explore, why does that trigger me? What political force is holding that string that does not want to let go? And it's something good for all of us to remember. An example of what is not, in my sort of spiritual, theological opinion, what is not handing over the reins of our country to God is destroying the Georgia Guidestones. I mean, I could see how someone could work up a theology that because the Guidestones were destroyed, now Satan is banished from Georgia or something, which I think is funny because there's the Satan went down to Georgia.
Devil went down to Georgia, played a fiddle.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you could see if this were a couple of sort of militant Christians shooting a bazooka at the Georgia Guidestones, you could see how that would be the motivation. Whereas the fact that it is so connected with Candace's campaign, I mean, that is a political act. And the problem is, you may have taken down a statue after we all complained so much about the left taking down statues. But that does not necessarily a spiritual stronghold break. Instead, it gives a justification to the powers that be to begin to even further categorize, Bible believing Christians as actual literal terrorists as to their definition.
Which
and
is
that
exactly
is more
what they
dangerous. Exactly, which has been the plan that we've tracked for at least a couple of years or even more. I mean, the trend has been long-standing, but really actual legislation has been coming into place over the past couple of years. And this is just an example of that.
Yeah, look up the Megiddo papers from these are FBI papers called the Megiddo Files, I think, published in like 1999. And it was all about these Christian cults that think the world is going to end at Y2K and things like that. So yes, it's been sort of a nebulous type of enemy that the intelligence agencies and everyone has been talking about for a long time. And anytime there's an opportunity to put some meat on those narratives, great for the whole divide and conquer methodology. Yes, so there you go. I think we're up to speed on the Georgia Guidestone.
I think we nailed it.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on whatever is erected in its place. That is
indeed
very interesting. What if they put a 10 Commandments pillar?
That would be fun. A big Baphomet statue, more likely. The Satanic Temple going to come in and make a proposal.